Welcome, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 7 of Vandals. I can't believe it's already been 7 episodes, and that's also a bit of a confusing thing to say because we took a break for a while, but we're back, and we have 2 new faces on the show this time. If you're watching Vandals for the first time, I would like to take this opportunity to introduce both my main man, Ender, and Kaplan. Ender's going to be our co-host for this episode. We love Ender, and in fact, let's take a moment to introduce Ender. For maybe you're unfamiliar with Ender. Maybe you don't know who Ender is. Ender is LEC talent, has normally worked on League of Legends, has done a little bit of Valorant work as well, has just moved back to LA, and he's looking to get his hands dirty with Valorant. Ender, how you feeling, baby?
Look, I'm feeling great. And the thing is, I know there's a lot of disgusting Jet mains that are going to be watching this. And I'm with you. I'm also a disgusting Jet main. The thing is, I've been maining Jet since before you knew Valorant existed. You know, I was a tester back in the day, so that's my claim to knowing things. That's the best I can do for you. But I've been following the scene, and I'm really looking forward to jumping in to a little bit more. I just actually booked my first Valorant gig, so expect more.
Ooh, baby! And then our guest for the episode this week is none other, than Adam Kaplan, the head coach of Ghost Gaming. Cap, baby, how are you?
I'm pretty good. I'm, not a disgusting Jet main. I would never, subject myself to playing that agent in ranked. And I hope one day she gets nerfed into the ground. And it's a pleasure to be here.
My kit costs 900 now. What are you talking about?
That's true.
Those are fighting words for some folks. So, as I mentioned earlier, if this is your first time watching Vandals, the intent of the show is to get to know the guest a little bit better, right? Like, we want to give Kaplan an opportunity to kind of flex a little bit about him, talk a bit about himself so we can get to know him better, what he's doing in the Valorant space, his thoughts on what's going on currently. And trust me, folks, there's plenty to talk about. But we're going to start off, Cap, nice and easy, kind of get them warmed up, get them all buttered up for the rest of the show. So, Kaplan, tell us your background. Tell me about the very beginning.
Well, it was 1994. I had just been born.
What was that like?
Well, I can't remember, but hopefully it was all right. Anyway, sorry, already derailing things. No, I've been into esports for a long time, for about 14 years now. I was 12 and was playing Counter-Strike Source and stumbled across it and loved it. It was great. I played on some Cal teams. If anyone remembers the Cyber Athlete Amateur League, those were the good old days. And I've played a lot of different esports off and on since then. I played a lot of Counter-Strike Go in, kind of ESDA main level for those who follow the NA leagues. And I've been jumped into Valorant the day beta started, April 7th, 2020. Never
Dang,
forget
dude,
that
you
day.
got that like booked, bro.
Nice.
I didn't know that.
It's a special day. And I was the in-game leader I built a team that ended up being Space Station Gaming, and I played there for like 4 months, and I've been head coach of Ghost Gaming Valorant for like 5 months. What else? I live in Seattle. I've got a bachelor's degree in psychology that I try to apply to my coaching. And pretty much it. Do a little content here and there.
Yeah, I like that too, especially like psychology. Like, as someone that's worked with like different managers in the past, I can tell you the managers that had psych degrees, which I've actually had a surprisingly high amount of, were always the best managers. So I assume that can apply a little bit to coaching as well when tensions can get a little higher. You mentioned too, like you got into like the Valorant esports scene pretty early on. Was there like similar esports like background in CS2? Did you ever do any coaching there prior to Valorant, or was it mainly just playing?
Just playing, actually. Yeah, I'd never done coaching, and I knew I wanted to coach actually before Valorant was even a thing. I wanted to have a career in esports, and I didn't want it to be playing forever. But I knew that actually playing a new game, if I could make it pro, would be the best into coaching. And in fact, my brother was a professional player in Overwatch before he became a coach, so I kind of tried to follow the same track there.
So now, Cap, tell me this. You mentioned from the very beginning you got into 1.6. You've touched a couple of different games throughout your career as a player, probably like casually as well. Talk to me about, let's take a further step back, right? Like, tell me about the transition between the casual gaming, right? Like when you were beating up on your cousins, or maybe you were the one getting like beat up by your older brother, or, you know, whatever it was. Talk to me about that transition from casual gaming into esports. When did you look at this and go, wait a second, I'm good. I'm better than a lot of people here. I can hang with the best.
Yeah, I mean, I started playing Counter-Strike Source on a team when I was 12, and it was
Jeez.
not a good team, certainly. But when you're a 12, 13-year-old, you've been playing shooters for 4 or 5 years, you end up being pretty good relative to a lot of the competition. And,
Yeah.
I ended up making friends with some players my age who are also playing at that level. By the time we're all in our mid-teens, we end up, when I was 12 and I've been playing Counter-Strike for 4 years, anyone else competing who's older hadn't really been playing shooters a lot of the time.
Right.
At such a young age, you kind of end up with this advantage in talent. And I just loved playing games. I loved competing. I didn't really think about making it a career back then. I was like, well, I want to win at this. I want to be on that big stage. But for me at that time, it was like, 2010, 2011. Esports wasn't big enough for me to seriously think like I'm going to have a career in this when I'm 30. But I think I started to kind of realize, okay, I'm really good at these things. I really like winning. I'm going to put my time into this and try to make it count. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you started pretty early there too. Was it always like hardcore, right? Like going to like CS or like any casual games before that, or are you just like, no, I gotta beat some real people on. I gotta beat real humans.
It's funny because I feel like growing up I was actually playing like console, like Ocarina of Time, and my brother and I would play like RTSs. I wasn't crazy competitive, and we didn't really play PC FPS until actually Planet Side was one of the first PC FPS games I played. That's an MMO FPS from way back. I just loved like playing. I didn't actually think about. I don't know if I really cared that much about winning until somebody was like, "Hey, do you want to make a team in this thing with me?" And I was like, "Okay," and I did it. I think a lot of people who get into esports played. I've had a lot of players and teammates who have played real life sports and like grew up understanding the competitive experience of it, like being really competitive. Okay, this game's fun and I want to win at it. I didn't play sports as a kid and I wasn't particularly competitive, so I think I kind of wandered into it probably more on accident than a lot of people who kind of made it in a game like CS.
Now, you say you kind of wandered into things a bit. Let's talk about the switch from CS to Valorant, right? Like Riot comes out with a blockbuster title that's supposed to compete with Counter-Strike. They have the pedigree behind them, right? League of Legends is the most popular esport in the world. Tell me a bit about that transition. Was it hard to leave CS? Did you feel like you were at a place in your career where you thought it's time for a change, or was that difficult?
No, not at all difficult. I was trying to kind of find my way into an esports career that wasn't playing, and I was just sort of like playing CS, trying to feel that out. Like, okay, maybe I'll go into coaching. And then I saw Project A got announced, right? Turns out Ender had been playing it long ago in testing, but I didn't know about it but the day it got announced, I like was all in right away. I didn't even know if it would be a great game, but like, okay, it's Riot, it's like CS, and I know that making it in a new esport is the best way to make it pro. So the day, October, whatever, that it got announced, I was like, yep, that's it. I'm going to play CS up until that point because I'm going to try to play Valorant. So it was all just preparation. And yeah, I was ready, like totally eager to switch, and I didn't touch CS. I don't think I've opened CS since Valorant came out.
Yeah, me
I'm
neither.
very proud of that.
The worst timeline was right after the beta ended, right? And you had to wait like the 2 weeks before they actually launched. It's like, I want to play a shooter, but I can't open up CS. It's just too painful. So I take it, like, were you a person, because I swear when Project A first got announced and they showed that first trailer, like, you remember Sova and the wall hacks and how everyone just like lost their mind? Were you like, you had like, did you have like doubts about this game coming? You're like, oh, abilities like wall hacks, like that can't exist. Resurrection, like, what is that?
Honestly, no, I was down. I think a lot of people who were like diehard TAC FPS players that were ready to switch were really turned off. But like, it's funny. Most of my old Counter-Strike teammates, I feel like a lot of them played like real life sports. They like had lives, like did things as teenagers, and then played CS. I didn't have No girlfriend, no football. Like I just played video
Right
games.
there with
when
you,
I
brother. Let's go.
I just played video games when I wasn't playing Counter-Strike, and so like I tried playing on like a Guild Wars 2 team when it came out. You know, I played a lot of League back in the day. I played fighting games. Like I love Magic. So like I was pretty. I mean, I played a lot of Overwatch. I didn't try to make it in that game, but I was pumped to like get a little genre mix going. Like I think I was less turned off by it than probably the average TAC FPS fan.
So you've mentioned a couple of times that your goal was to eventually transition to a coaching role, right? You were playing, and either it was because you'd been playing for too long, or you were just getting old like the rest of us. But you wanted to go ahead and transition. Tell me a bit about that, because you did that a little bit into Valorant's career, right? Like you didn't take the opportunity to shift from a player to a coach while swapping games. Is it safe to say that you felt like you had to establish yourself a bit as a player before you made the jump to a coach?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely knew that if I could make it pro as a player, well, first of all, it'd be fun. You know, no matter how long it lasts, it'd be nice to have said I played the game pro, to have the jersey, to it was something I've always wanted to do, and I never got to be a pro player. When Valorant came out, I kind of my plan definitely was I'm gonna play so that I can be a pro coach long term.
Mhm.
And I don't know why, and I don't think I ever thought a lot about it, but I kind of knew I didn't want to be a player when I was 30. I didn't love playing that much. Um, Once you start playing, though, you kind of catch the itch. Like it's hard to
Yeah.
pull yourself out of it as a player.
Yep.
I wasn't like, yeah, this is exactly when I want to switch to coaching. Some stuff had happened, and I ended up parting ways with Space Station, and it ended up being okay. Do I want to try to pick this back up, or do I want to switch right now? But once you're a player, it's hard to kind of be able to say, okay, I'm done.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Sure.
No, I can definitely see that, and I wonder, like, do you find, like, even now, like, while you're not like playing professionally, do you have like the itch still to like try hard in ranked? Like, do you still like keep up on the leaderboard, or now that you find yourself coaching, do you spend more time like researching and not actually playing the game yourself?
Yeah, that's a good question. I definitely don't get the same level of competitive itch in ranked. Like
Hmm.
when I haven't played in a while, my adrenaline gets pumping. Like I get super into the game. Like I
Yep.
feel like I think I probably felt in the middle of a tournament when I was playing, because I'm like, oh man, like I want to win this clutch. Like you just feel it when you haven't been playing too much. You don't get as desensitized, but I don't try to keep up too hard with ranked. I'm actually trying to play more lately. I do think you get a lot out of playing, and I think I'm starting to realize that a lot of my perspective and insights as a coach relied on experience I had as a player,
Hmm.
and it's starting to get a little outdated as the game's patching, and I'm starting to realize, okay, I need to be playing these new agents, like feeling how the game feels right now, to kind of hold on to that insight. But yeah, I'm not a. I definitely put most of my time to watching the game and researching it. Although I think it's because I was an IGL and was like the kind of player to
Mhm.
mostly put
Sure.
time into watching it anyway
You
outside of ranked
right, you already had
sessions.
sort of that similar mindset, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah.
you just touched on something really interesting, because I think this is a conversation that talent goes through a lot as well. Is like, you know, do you play or do you watch film? And if you're not like good enough as a player, should you be talent? And that whole thing you mentioned, yeah, you spend most of your time watching film and studying and right and like taking notes. And you and I have talked about this a good bit. Um, but would you say that your time is still better spent going over VODs, or are you leaning back towards playing is so much more worthwhile for you individually to grind ranked that it is worth taking some of that time?
Yeah, I think it's definitely worth taking some of the time to do
Mm.
that. Like I think watching games becomes really useful in the middle of a meta and tournament, especially like watching footage of previous teams.
Mhm.
You know, the previous games from teams that are recent, doing a lot of that. I think it's probably the most valuable way to spend my time, thinking about kind of how will the overall meta help with the large strategy. But I
Right.
think one useful thing about playing ranked is when you're doing individual coaching, like when I'm watching one player's POV in a scrim, I find that if I've been playing a bit of ranked recently, especially if I've played their agent, I actually try to think, even subconsciously, like what decisions would I make in their
Mhm.
shoes? And
Mhm.
usually, I mean, they're better players; they're making better decisions a lot of the time. But still, I find that it's really much more easy to critique their decision making and like add feedback on, hey, what if you did this instead? If I've been playing, it doesn't necessarily be that I've been that agent in that situation, but it keeps you fresh and being able to think in one player's shoes if you stay grinding the game.
Yeah, and I
also,
think there's go ahead.
I just, and to quickly add, I think when a patch drops, especially, like, you got to put ranked reps in because you want to be ahead, and you're not even watching your team's scrims as a sample size. Like, I just have to play KO to figure out how good he is right away.
For sure. Yeah, and I think that's something, like, because of Riot's patch cycle and how rapidly they change the game, on top of the fact that this game is literally just a year old from release. It does evolve pretty rapidly. So I think that especially in the early stages of the game, and I think this happens in a lot of games, in most games even, is that the best coaches are often going to be former players and people that are very high level themselves. And then I would imagine, like, a couple years down the road, it probably is less important to put in like a lot of hours as a player to like get that game sense. I felt it myself, like even covering like League. I felt like the first couple of years I was casting, like I had to play, like I had to stay like really high elo, had to keep up playing a ton of games in order to like feel like I knew what a pro player was thinking. And then as time goes on, it's like, now I've just talked to these pros for like 3 years. Like, I know how they think for the most part.
Yeah.
And I imagine you have that same similar learning curve whenever you join into a new game.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. And I think, like, there's a lot to be. I take a lot of pride in having jumped in right away when the game came out. I feel like people were trying so hard to figure out every piece of the game instantly. Like, there's something for me really special about having played this game right at the start on teams, like being one of the first teams trying to scrim before people even had beta access. Like, you're trying to figure it out and there's nobody holding your hand. Like, there is no meta, like there's nothing. And even people who switched over 3-4 months in, there's some basics in place that they just get explained.
Right.
I feel that you get a really nice perspective on being able to think and be critical about Valorant when, like, you were just given the game and like, hey, good luck, like you're gonna figure out how it plays.
It's so funny too, because like at the top of the show I was like, oh, I used to be a play tester, I've got all this information. Like, none of that information mattered at all. Like, I played at a time when there was no such thing as like meta cipher cameras or meta tripwires. Like, it was so freeform that like just within like 1 week of the game being out, like there were already, like, everyone was better than me. The game had completely changed. And obviously that's like on a super small micro scale how quickly that happens, but you're gonna see the same thing over the course of a game's life cycle, where there is rapid change and you have to be able to put in an insane amount of time, especially earlier on when it does have that quicker refresh rate.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's fun. I remember when the game first came out, the dev team, there was like a team of like 5 of the devs that were the best team. They were the best team in the game for the first 2 weeks. Like, nobody could beat them. I remember like a week or two into the team I was playing with, one of our guys was like, we were done with scrims. He's like, wait, yo, you guys want to play the devs? And we were like, oh my God, yeah, we want to play the devs. And we got like crushed. I was like, wait, they're using the Cypher character? I guess maybe he's good. Like, I remember they were all using the Phantom, and I was like, hold on, like, is this the better gun? And it was just, it definitely, my point, my original point with that was, if you the dev team play now, right, they would, no offense, devs, but you would get completely demolished by any of the top 15 NA teams. So
it's still pretty high elo.
A long way.
I'll give him some credit.
I see him grinding in there.
And shout out to my boy Dan, because if you don't know, his IGN, he was on the Riot team. His IGN is Penguin. And there's now the Dan the Penguin Gun Buddies. So that's where that came from. And all those penguins all over Icebox. Just got to get that in there.
Yep.
All right, let's talk Ghost Gaming. Okay. We've spent some time getting to know Cap a bit better. Now let's transition over to your team. As you mentioned, you've been head coach of Ghost Gaming for a little while. How have things been since really the end of your stage 2 run? How have things been going?
We're hanging in there. We're doing pretty good. We've been doing some rebuilding after stage 2. It's been a bit of a constant rebuild process, but we did some big rebuilding. We're trying a different player on IGL. We've a player Koala Noob as a trial, and he's doing excellently. We've kind of played in a couple tournaments to try to get back on the map. but it's always a tough spot that it's our first tournament in a while and we have a trial and that game's meta moves around in the middle of that. So we've seen, I think we want better results on paper when you look at these kind of recent little tournaments we've played in since stage 2. But as a coach, to be honest, I do think we really should have won some of the games we've lost recently.
Yep.
That aside, the main reason was to warm ourselves back up to tournaments and kind of focus on the big picture, which is stage 3 prep. It's always the big picture is the next VCT stage.
For sure. How do you sort of, because I mean, it's obviously difficult, like competing in tournaments while also like trialing out new players. How do you sort of judge success for the team? Because I mean, it can't all just be about like winning, losing. Like, do you feel like you're getting a better read for how the team likes to play? Do you feel like you're learning things that you wouldn't necessarily in like normal practice sessions?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's always a big element of tournaments that you have to prep for. There's the nerves and excitement. How does that impact a team and individual decision making, especially with a trial? Like, how is this trial? Like, are they just totally, oh, it's another scrim? Do they get really excited? Is it like an energetic or excitement, or an excitement that like makes the team feel kind of shaky or a little out of control? That stuff's really important. And basically, yeah, how does a team handle the pressure? How do we use pauses? I, as a coach, make a point to really emphasize constant kind of go next positivity, even in scrims, because I believe that if you're constantly breaking down mistakes in the middle of a scrim, your play environment falls apart so much that productivity is no longer very high. I mean, that's that's kind of a core pillar of my coaching philosophy, but it's especially in tournaments, right? It's totally like, unless the mistake that happened is relevant to something that's for sure going to happen against this game, it's just like, I don't want to hear a word about it. Like, okay, we totally threw that post plant, but we're not going to talk about that. We're going to say like, we got this, boys, let's go. And like every player can be told that that's an important part of tournament play, but it's easy to forget it when you've just been scrimming for like 1 or 2 months straight. So I really like, it's really important to me, probably more than anything with these warm up tournaments, kind of to make sure the players are like getting that vibe and that atmosphere and that confidence going. I want us to come into VCT like, and I want to like know that everyone's going to be yelling nice after a big kill at the start of a round. People are just going to be like, all good, go next after a mistake. And this is just the dry run for that.
Yeah. Let's talk about your stage 1 and stage 2 runs for Ghost Gaming. And I'm going to apologize ahead of time because I know this hurts, right? You think about Ghost Gaming as a roster and you like make a run down your performance so far, right? Across both stages. You've got a lot of wins. You've got a lot of wins, and your losses are all there are three teams you lost to: Envy, 100 Thieves, and Cloud9 4 times. Three or 4 times. And those, Cap, those are tier 1 teams. Those are some of the best to do it. Like Cloud9 was 1 step away from Berlin. 100 Thieves, 100 Thieves is a household name in the Valorant space now, and Envy has been known as having some of the best core 5 that all of North America has. So what was lacking, right? Like what was lacking in those performances that you've addressed at this point?
Yeah, I mean it's a good question. I think that we've had some tough losses to some other teams, but I'm gonna cut them off because they were in the constraints of like we were a team for like 3 days, and we have had 2 tough losses in these sort of like smaller, non-riot tournaments. But other than that, yeah, those are the teams we've lost to. We also lost 1 VCT where I was filling in and our star player was on paternity leave. So I'm going to ignore that one.
We'll scratch that one too.
I felt I did a little lower than I expected. Anyway. I think it's tough. Like there were definitely, it's been a lot of different learning lessons, like lessons learned. There were definitely mistakes. Like we made mistakes as a team that we just shouldn't make. Like we threw rounds, we didn't communicate, we were too excited in retake, like basic things that I want my team to feel shit about, to be honest. I don't, and I feel shitty about it. And it's important to me that we realize those things should never have happened. But we've also been rebuilding since the start, kind of trying to, okay, this is a really promising squad. There's something long-term here. We want to find all the right pieces. And we've been pretty relentlessly making changes to find the right 5, regardless of like whether there's a VCT in a week. And that's just a choice that the org's made, that myself and my manager and the team's made. We all want that. Valorant's a really hard game because there's so much flow of ideas. You can't just like hard micro IGL a bunch of players. So when you make one change, it takes a little bit to build up that chemistry. And then you got these meta changes that just, if they're timed bad with that, it's so hard, because it's like you can get a smokes player, but that doesn't mean that they're going to be good at the next smokes agent. Like it might be a completely, like Omen and Astra
exactly.
are different. There's different players that are crazy at those agents that are not good at the other one. I mean, that stuff's tough. And to be honest, also Cloud9, man, I mean, we played them 4 times, and like they're a really good team.
Well, and I think if
it's hard to beat a team when you're starting to lose 2 or 3 times.
And if I remember correctly, I think of the 4 series, two or maybe 3 of them went to map 3. So even those
2 of them
series
went
were
to map
close.
3, and 2 of them went to only 2 maps. Yeah. No, it's been some close series for sure.
Yeah, I'm wondering, like, how do after like tough losses like that, how do like maybe some of the players on the team and yourself like react? Do you have like the type of people that'll like wake up the next morning, start like hard grinding? Do you have the people that are like going back and like watching every single round, trying to figure out exactly what went wrong? Do you have the people that are like just forget about it, move on? Like, do you see big differences in your players that have stuck around and how they respond?
Yeah, that's a good question. I try to encourage us to not get into the nitty gritty of talking about the loss right after. Sometimes it ends up happening. I try really hard to feel the pulse of the team and how everything feels before I decide whether it's a conversation we should be having that evening. Sometimes I'm there pretty aggressively adding restraints. Like, okay, like we were talking, but now we're starting to talk about 2 or 3 specific rounds we lost. Like, can we steer away and stay big picture here? Because I do think trying to get critical with each other, especially for players who are peers with each other, right after you've lost, is a super dangerous thing to go into. And I've got really kind and mature players on my team, and I still don't think it's a great thing. I encourage us to take a full day, like let everyone sit with it emotionally. Everybody ends up watching the VOD on their own time anyway. And then we kind of come back, we watch the VOD together, and we really try to be like, all right, we've talked about like everything we messed up, but what are like the big things? Like what really shouldn't happen, and like what do we want to make sure we fix, in the next week? And I really try to come out with like 2 or 3 like big goals.
Yeah, and I think even just thinking about the perspective you shared earlier, it's like a psych major, and I don't read like too much into it, but I'm just like, wow, like having that perspective and how you deal things too. Like, if I wanted to be a coach, it sounds like a good philosophy to have too, to make sure spirits can run high.
Yeah, exactly. I think you just have to like, esports teams are such a freak level of critical environment. Like you're constantly you're putting 50, 60 hours a week into this with these people. It's super competitive, and you constantly have to be critical of each other. It's like not a normal gig, and I think a lot of the time an important thing is being like, is this really the right time and place to be critical? Like, is this conversation gonna go well right now? And like sometimes a conversation leads to a complete fight, and like I'll say like, stop, everybody go like walk for 1 minute, get water, like take 3 breaths, come back. And like I'm not taking the credit, but sometimes I at least even feel physical stress. And it's like, if that didn't happen, it would have been such an explosive conversation. But even just like 1 or 2 minutes to kind of come back to it in a better place, it makes a world of difference, in my opinion.
Well, it's just such a unique dynamic, right? You alluded to it earlier, but at the end of the day, you've got 5 players, and then you've got coaching staff, analysts, and you don't get into this unless you want to raise trophies, right? Like you don't do this unless you want to win. So you put all of these competitors in a highly stressful competitive environment where everyone's focus is win. And it's so easy to see how you get to that point, right? Like I competed, it was many years ago, but I competed as well. And I distinctly remember those moments, right? Where I knew everybody on the team wanted to win more than anything else. The problem was we had different philosophy, like we had different approaches on how we wanted to get there. So with all of that in mind, Cap, you've talked about trialing players. There's obviously a bunch of meta changes that are going on that we'll talk about here in a moment. How are you feeling heading into stage 3? Because Bad Boy starts next week.
Pretty much like 9 or 10 days from now. Yep. I feel good. I'm excited. It's been a lot of, I don't know. It's been a lot of like trying to get the roster right, trying to build the team chem while doing that, while these meta changes are happening. Sometimes it's like mid VCT. Like we've literally been we've pretty much been trialing players for each of our VCT stage qualifier runs.
Yeah.
Like, and even if like by the time we go into this VCT, we've only been playing with the 5 players we're playing with for like 9 or 10 days, just feeling like, okay, yeah, but this is the 5 and we're going to play through this whole month and carry on whatever happens as this 5 past this regardless. Like I'm pumped to have that stability. I feel like it's going to motivate the players a lot. I think we can get a nice little honeymoon phase going into it. And to be honest, a great part about these huge meta shifts is like it's a fresh start. Like for a team that's been behind, and like Breeze is new. Like we, I don't know. You can look at. I'm fine with saying it. We don't really play Icebox, right? I mean, you can look at are the Spike stats. We've never played it. Obviously, we don't play it. Like, why pick up that map, which people have been playing for 4 months, when we can pick up a new map? Like, it's all these things are a good chance for a team like us, I think, to kind of take people and catch them off guard. Valorant's a great game for that because of these massive patches.
So you alluded to Breeze, so let's go ahead and talk about it, right? Breeze is officially active. It's been out for a little while now, and we can even have this really interesting conversation around for the teams that did not make it to playoffs, for the teams that did not make it to Reykjavik. You've been able to work on Breeze more. You've had more time to focus on Breeze, but let's just talk about the map initially, and then we can transition into preparation and kind of how that works. Tell me your thoughts on Breeze as a map. What do you got?
All right. I don't love it.
What? Really?
Thank you. Someone said it. Thank you.
I'm not trying to. I love you, Riot, but
I'm disappointed in both of you. Go
This
on.
man's got good taste.
Talk to me.
There's some things I really like about it.
Sure.
Okay, having a bigger map is super refreshing because there's definitely the meta we're just coming out of. It's just so much about utility that it doesn't feel like you're playing a shooter sometimes, and it's just like overwhelming. It's like it kind of feels like almost a card game. Like my movement where I am doesn't even matter. I'm just like outside of this room and you're outside of this room, and we're playing this game where like I throw a thing and you throw a thing and I throw a thing, and like Breeze is a little more open, and I really like that about it. It's like just having this extra space. This one piece of utility can't just like chunk out a whole play and stall it. It's really refreshing. There's some things I really like. I think Breeze B site, I believe I'm gonna give it top 2 Spike site in the game. It's just so nice. It's got
What's number 1?
It might be Bind A for me.
Okay, I like it. I like
You're
it.
a man of
Continue.
culture.
Yeah. Thank you. It's got this nice pillar in the middle. It's got these areas you can play around. I mean, we've all seen these plays on Cobble B in CS with the pillar. Like, pillars are great. This game needed a pillar and a site, and now we got a pillar. I really like that site. It's nice. But I think A site, it's hard for me to really explain why, it just feels horrible. Like, I'm sorry, I'm going to be blunt. It's just weird. The angles are weird. It feels like there's nowhere a defender can play. And the larger a map gets in a tactical shooter, usually the more teams end up making solo pushes or lurk plays or kind of flanks on either half because there's just too much to watch for the team that's playing grouped up. So I have a large criticism that the extremities of the map branch out in very complicated ways. And I would actually have preferred they did that in the inverse. I think if you have a smaller map where it's easier for a team to flank watch and then group up in another area with their team, then it's okay to have complex, branching out. But if flank watching is difficult, then if you just make it even more difficult with all these kind of options that spiderweb out, especially defense toward attack, that's a critique. My other critique is just I wish this map had the bind TPs because it's so huge
Yeah.
that if defense can't stop, sorry, I'm getting real into the strategy here.
No, do it.
If defense cannot stop a team from very aggressively hitting a site through the structure of the sites, then you have a problem on such a big map because defense takes a very long time to rotate between the sites because it's a larger map. There's more travel time. And I feel that these chokes are kind of easy to flood out of and easy to split these sites on attack. And it becomes this very attack-sided map where like attack's just sending it A or B, A or B, A or B. And like it can start to feel, depending on the meta, like defense just has to coin flip like A or B, A or B. And then you lose some depth to the game.
Yeah, I do feel like I agree with a lot of your points there, like especially like the different branching off on the extremities too, and it felt like Riot was almost like, oh, like we don't want to let Cypher or Killjoy easily, hold both of these things maybe, but then it's just like kind of a maze to get around in a way.
Yeah.
One of the big changes though with adding a new map on top of just the strategy is like the pick ban element of things. So do you feel like now with the 6th map in the rotation, obviously best of 5s, that has a really large impact, best of 3s even, what's your sort of read on that, and how does that change your approach going into the next stage of the tournament?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't change too much for us because we're so kind of fresh with the rebuild and trying to figure out the meta that I don't feel we have a ton of time to play with. My camera's doing something strange. Doesn't change too much for us just because we've been in the middle of rebuilds and meta shifts. In a lot of ways, I think we feel like we're playing catch up. So we're going to just try to focus on the maps we got to focus on and just, we feel like we still have to nail the basics. But it does make for some interesting play where more so than before, in my experience with BO3s now, more so than previous, now there's a 6-map pool. It's a big question of if my map pool is very different from the team I'm playing, or I think it is, our strengths are very opposite, then sometimes I want to take the lower seedings choice where basically you get to choose more of the maps in a lot of these tournaments. Whereas if your map pools line up a lot and you prefer, for example, side choice, there's a little more depth. I think like when you're the high, there's some complexity, especially when you're the better seeded team, to deciding what order you want to do. Do you want to be the first or second ban? That's kind of interesting.
Cap, how do you see this playing out for best of 5s, right? Because up until this point, there was this awkward time where we only had 4 maps for best of 5 and kind of how did they play out? And then we finally, we got to a 5-map pool and it kind of takes all the guesswork out of it. And in a lot of ways that exposes weaknesses, right? Like you're as a team, if you're constantly competing in best of 5s, you can't be like New Turn from Korea, who is just really bad at Haven. You can't afford to have that in a best of 5. How do you see that playing out with a 6-map pool?
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting. I think, to be honest, I haven't looked at the BO5 rule set. I know they posted the map kind of ban process for the upcoming VCT stage, and I didn't even look at the BO5 section because I was like, well, we're in BO5 until maybe we're in a BO5 and then I'll look at it and figure it out. But get to cross that bridge when we get to it. Hopefully we get to that bridge. But it'll be interesting. Like in general, having a 6 map, I think it's. I guess I wish I was informed. I apologize on how they're gonna do it. It depends on that, but it could more aggressively favor one team if they're the one who gets to choose the one ban.
Yeah, like presumably
line up with the other team.
Yeah, like presumably if like the higher seed gets ban choice, then in a BO5, like that's a really big deal because then you don't get exposed for that map that you never pracked because you can just ban one away in BO3s all the time. Whereas lower bracket, like finally now we have a bigger incentive for like being in the upper bracket when we're getting into these like double elim formats where usually it was just like basically even when you get to the very end.
Yeah, no, it is kind of insane because most teams will have a permaban, and I think it makes it more one-sided because exactly like you said, Ender, the team who's banning can just ban their permaban,
right?
Whereas the other team might end up having to play their permaban if it's not the same. Whereas with the BO5, if both teams had a permaban, well, at least at some point, if you go all 5 maps, they're both going to have had to play the map they don't play. That is a good point.
All right. Speaking of changes, patch. It drops tomorrow morning. Well, at the point of us recording this, it drops tomorrow morning, and it's a big boy, right? It's a real big boy. There's a whole lot afoot here. All of the patch notes are not publicly released at this point, but there is some information out there on what's going on. Agents are getting changes, big changes as far as how much a kit costs. You even think about Sky and some of the changes she's having. I'm seeing Sky get a lot of love. What stands out to you the most from the changes that you're aware of?
Yeah, ignoring KO, right? That's kind of a separate.
Yeah, we'll talk about that separately.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. The biggest change of all is the fact that utility just costs more, and it's going to be really wild because utility costs a lot more. This makes ecos and force buys much worse of an idea. It makes having a full buy round much more expensive. You need to save up for that, and you cannot be messing around spending money on a little utility because that's going to cost more money than you can afford to spend on an eco or force. I think it'll make the game less swingy within a game for spectators and players. I think if a team's winning 1 or 2 of the pistols, if you win both pistols, I think now you're going to have a much higher % chance of winning the game than with the old utility changes. I think on paper, that makes me think the better team will win more because there's less comeback mechanic, but it also means if the weaker team steals both pistols, they can just get really far ahead. It's also very peculiar because the utility cost being increased makes pistol buys really weird. And so it's kind of weird. This round becomes a lot more important, but it's really hard to figure out how this round is going to play out now because there's just going to be more raw gunplay on pistol. So that isn't one specific agent, but I think that's the most sweeping change in the patch for me.
Yeah, definitely the economy change in all. And it feels like Riot basically just had the opinion that abilities were too strong, right? So a lot of the guns get reduced in cost apart from the big 2 heavy hitters in Vandal and Phantom, and then all the abilities across the board are going up except for Cypher and Killjoy, which I find very interesting. And I wonder if it's a preemptive thing they're doing with KO coming out. They're oh, well, these guys are going to be nerfed or something like that. But that one's a little bit odd to me, even if their popularity in both solo queue and pro is starting to go down a little bit. That one's kind of strange.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. Maybe it's just that they're happy to have the flank watch utility on every round, no matter what. It doesn't end up affecting the feel of the round too much or something.
Yeah.
But yeah.
The other thing, so going back to the gun costs, I want to actually know how you felt about the a meta now it was many months ago, but when Stinger was really powerful, and it seemed pretty much every round too, you would have, even after losing a pistol round, you'd have a force, you'd have the Stingers coming out, and now a lot of guns are being reduced in cost. Stinger looks like it's going down 250, which is quite large. As a matter of fact, even I think the Marshall is going down, and that's already been if you're watching solo queue, that's definitely rising in popularity for early round buys. And personally, I always thought the game was more interesting when we had these early forces, because it felt every round was on very similar footing. You have pistol versus pistol, then you have SMG, then the losing team still has enough money to sort of buy an SMG. The winning team is carrying it over in a bonus. So a lot of those early rounds were very even and could go either way. But now, if you want to force, you can force, but you're not going to get to buy utility for 3 rounds. That's just not going to happen. So, A, how do you feel about the old metas? And B, how do you see that playing out?
Yeah, I don't mind when I don't think it's the worst thing if forcing after pistol after you lose a pistol is a decent option. I think if it's unfavorable but better than ecoing, it's worth the % chance increase of winning. I think it can be fun to play. I think for spectators it can be really fun. One of my favorite tweets I ever made was that feeling when you lose pistols, so then you force stingers into their stingers and they lose, so then they force stingers into your stingers and then you lose and you force stingers, and then you just get stuck playing Stinger Valorant for 7 rounds. I hated that because it just felt both teams are just hitting each other's economy just back and forth scrappily to a point where like nobody can ever afford to get like a Phantom and a helmet, or a full armor, excuse me. But yeah, so I don't miss that, but I don't mind the weapons becoming, these eco weapons becoming a little cheaper now, especially because utilities getting more costly, and I think especially for weapons like the Stinger, you need utility to like close the gap. Like that's why they were good, because you would just throw a ton of util and then take the space with the Stingers. It's more expensive to get the utility you want to couple with it, so I don't really mind like them toning certain eco weapons down, because to have the utility to help close out the round, you're going to be spending more anyway. So
Yeah, I wonder too if we end up seeing like a lot of, or like some players on teams like buying less Phantoms, less Vandals, because like utility is going up. Like I imagine like Sage players like often probably aren't going to be able to like full buy a rifle if they also want to have utility with like the orbs going up in price. Like the Bulldog got reduced in price, the Guardian got reduced as well. Now the Guardian seems like a pretty cheap option. Like Scream over in EU must be like the happiest man in the world, because he can buy a Guardian and armor now too. He used to just buy the Guardian no armor every round. Now he can actually get some armor too. So these types of things, I have a feeling, are going to start catching on as more popular buys on a couple different agents.
Yeah, I would love to see that happen, and I think there's a chance they might have to buff the Guardian or Bulldog a little bit in terms of its performance as well. I understand you don't want these weapons to get strong enough that teams are just forcing and like not saving for the better rifle. But right now, what you see a lot is when teams do force buy and end up with an awkward economy, they'll have like, you know, 2 guys saved, they drop 2 rifles, and then that 5th player is just very often forcing a sheriff and armor with their utility and having like this awkward extra amount of money in the bank, because these guns are just too expensive or too weak to bother justifying over a sheriff. And I hope that the price changes are enough that like, I don't want to see a meta where people are just, instead of saving, they're just like buying 5 Bulldogs or Guardians. But I want to see like that 5th guy who like doesn't quite have enough credits to join the Phantom Vandal train on the buy around. I hope like it'd be nice if they got something a little better than a sheriff.
There's a lot, right? There's a lot spinning up. There's so many different changes. And I think this might be probably the biggest patch we've seen, right? Like how do you prepare a team for that? You're just a couple of days away from the new stage starting. For many teams, this is it, right? Like we start talking about getting into champions, right? You get in through the last chance qualifier, but in order to do that, you have to get in through a certain amount of points, which if you are not really on the point board, Berlin's it. You've got to get there so you can get the points, so you get a chance at the last chance qualifier, and then so you get a chance at champions. Like there's a lot at stake here. So from a coach's perspective, how do you prepare? How do you get your team ready?
A lot of conversations. We've already had for like, so this patch, we got a preview of it starting Friday morning, and like we've probably spent over 8 hours between this now Monday night like and Friday morning, like outside of scrim time, just like sitting there talking about the agents, testing them out, arguing about what comps are good, why we think a certain agent, I think this flash will be good because of this. And it's just like an overwhelming amount of ideas being thrown out between 6 people. And the hope is if you just do enough of it and you have a good enough, handle on game theory, that like we can end in a place where like we have comps that are pretty good guesses at what will be good, because it's so challenging. You also have to test these comps out, figure out if they're good. And then even if like you also need time to build protocols and comfort and setups on a comp. So we can't just spend the next 2 weeks trying 6 comps. Like at some point we got to go like, all right, well, I don't know, but I guess we're playing this comp because we got to have something prepared with the comp. It's really hard. And I think it depends kind of on where team's at, but for us, we're kind of the scrappy underdog. I think we really want to kind of crack the meta ahead of everybody. Like I don't want to just go in with a old meta comp and play Sentinels and try to beat them. Like I'd much rather, I think we have a better shot trying to have a better pulse on the new patch. So we're really, really trying to go hard with it.
Well, I think that's great. Like I'm on board the train of thought that like if you have a bunch of people that are like enthusiastic about theory crafting on your team, like you're going to be able to come up with some really cool ideas.
Yeah, no, it's almost too much enthusiasm. There's just so many ideas going back and forth, and like we really embrace democracy, and sometimes it's a lot of like just intuitive, like, okay, this person's really passionate about this idea,
Mm.
like they're gonna use their like veto power to be like, we gotta try this agent in this comp, like, and then people are kind of like, all right, and it's a lot of it's just talking, talking, talking. It takes a lot, but it's really fun. Honestly, it's my favorite thing. Honestly, my favorite thing to do in the game.
Well, Cap, and so think you mentioned earlier, as because of your team's DNA, you are better off like trying to get ahead of the curve, right? And figure out
Yeah.
what will be the meta, define the meta instead of adapting to the meta. We saw a lot of teams in Iceland who did not adapt to the meta, who walked in to Astra and Viper comps still playing Omen, right? And that just didn't fly. It was ugly. A lot of these teams really, they got exposed because of their inability to adapt, right?
Yeah.
Is that, I mean, that kind of has to be the approach here, right? Like you said, you can't walk into stage 3 without knowing how to play Breeze, without really leaning into this Astra. Like, there's no way you can walk into this with an old comp and think it'll go well, right?
Yeah, I think, you know, it'll be interesting for this current qualifier without KO, because I think there might like there's going to be different takes from within. Sorry, I'm trying to think of how to structure. I think Astra was so oppressive on
Yeah.
the game's pace and the way it played that if you had a take that wasn't running Astra, it was a hot take, and in my opinion, a terrible take, and
Yeah.
it was super punishing. I think we might not know what the meta is by the end of this first qualifier. KO will be coming into play anyway, so it will be a kind of a KO meta after that. But it might be kind of hard to tell, even walking out for me of the first qualifier, like what was the meta for this one qualifier and who really had the nut cracked. And I also think it won't be as punishing to have a slightly off take as it was to, like, if you just weren't running Astra, it was so punishing.
Sure.
I don't want to get ahead of myself with the KO part of that response, because I know we're going to talk about him.
Well, that's what I'm going to ask you about. Because here's the thing: is you don't technically have to think about KO right now. But like, imagine he is enabled, right? What do you think of the agent? And like, how do you feel like he's going to change the pro landscape? Like, do you think he's just overpowered right now? Do you think that there's like a really critical element to his kit that you have to have on a team?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this agent's crazy. I'll just say that first of all. Like, I firmly believe that I was talking this morning with my buddy Coach Dream of Cloud9 White. And we just agreed, like, this. I think his suppression mechanic is just crazy. It's just meta defining. Like, if we could define a meta based on abilities, I think it might be tricky for pre-Astra. But like, okay, Astra meta. Obviously, a lot of what she does impacted the game, but the reality is the suck, like, was it. Like, this ability affected the whole pace of the way the game played. It defined the whole meta. I think the suppression mechanic is, we were in the suck meta, we're in the suppression meta now. Or I think we're going there. So his knife, you throw it, and it's this big radius. It tells you who you've suppressed. Basically, it means they can't use abilities for 8 seconds, which is an enormous amount of time.
That is super long.
It's a pretty large circle. Like, if you throw it, it's like most of A site on Ascent, for example. You can kind of throw a knife in the middle that gets Hell and the green box and Generator and a little bit of Heaven. Like, it's big. It goes through walls. It's free. It gives info. I think this thing is absolutely wild. And I'm getting ahead of myself, kind of losing track of the original question because I'm so passionate. But I think it's probably, I believe, only competing with his ult, it's probably the best ability the game's ever seen. And I think it's going to be pretty overpowered and impressive. And I'm happy to elaborate, but I'll yeah.
I'm curious to hear you compare it to the Astra, because and look, dog, you're a head coach, right? You're a whole lot smarter than I am. But the Astra, like, you could read the writing on the wall. When we saw what Astra was going to be able to do, it was very blatantly like, she's about to flip this game upside down.
Yeah.
right? She's going to change the way people think about the game. You mentioned pacing, duration of rounds. It's all going backwards. Now, everything's been completely convoluted because of her kit. You're saying that KO is going to have the same level of impact?
Yeah, I mean, for me, we've seen different metas in the game, but the kind of where the game was at before Astra was that you could so quickly aggress a piece of space, like a paranoia and a recon and a jet dashing all at once, that it was very difficult to reactively do anything to stop the team from aggressing on you. If you were the person reacting to this happening, it was almost instantaneous.
Right.
And then Astra comes along, right, and her suck, you just look over there and you press the button, and then you can't get through the space. It's kind of like a hard nope. Doors closed. I got 5 of these. They're all around the map. Nope. Doors closed for a minute. Kind of like a Sage slow. And it caused a meta that was a lot about trading utility. Like these long-winded rounds where you're like, I'm going to throw this and you're going to throw that. And I'm going to throw this and you're going to throw that. And I'm going to try to get all these sucks out and like trade this utility until we kind of have this round where utility is stripped away from it enough that we can actually play the game.
Yeah.
The suppression mechanic, you throw that knife and hit people, that's it. No more utility trading. 8 seconds, you can't throw anything back at me. I could do whatever I want. I could run right at you. I could keep throwing stuff at you. But your only choices are hopefully you were in a position to run away, or you just have to swing and try to fight me with your gun.
Right.
And, I think the next layer of that is, well, you're just trying to squeeze something in before the mechanic goes off, because other than that, you can shoot this knife, but it goes through walls and it's 0.6 seconds before it pops. So I personally think the radius of it as a sphere is extremely large, and when you combine that with the fact that it goes through walls, I feel that pro teams will have their KOs with knives being thrown in spots where you just can't. It's like going to hit half a site, but there's no way you could be in a position where you can actually shoot it. Maybe buy an Odin and get it through the wall or something.
Really go 5 head on it.
Or your Sova sitting there with a shock dart held, ready to hit where the knife goes.
Yeah, he's got to send it off before he gets hit by it, though, because that'll cause other problems. Because that's the thing is, like, we're only just starting to see some of the crazy things you can do with it. Like, the general population still has yet to really get their hands on it. They're just now getting a taste of it. And like I was able to play on some of like the servers over the weekend where they let like a bunch of influencers in, and like even like the multiple uses, both offensively and defensively. Like if I'm trying to attack versus a Killjoy and I'm Jet and my dash gets turned off, well, now I can't, like, how do I lead the charge in, right? How do I get that first angle and then D-peek? No, I've turned into a normal agent.
Right.
If I'm playing Brimstone or Omen and I get hit, well, the rest of my team's fine, but I get hit, well, there's no smoke. Guys, you have to come back. Like, so I think there's really some nasty things you can do based on the timing of when it's used too. Like, especially if teams aren't like super precise in the way they're hitting sites and stuff like this, where you can catch sort of people like between ability uses and then completely divide up how the team is supposed to use this stuff. So for pro teams that are just now getting to start experimenting with this, I feel like if you're an early innovator, if you're the theory crafters again around an agent like this, and you can figure out exactly how to optimize, that's going to be a huge advantage.
That's money.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's gonna, a big part of Astra is that she affected the pace of the game heavily. For example, on Haven, you can suck right when the barrier comes up, so that the attackers can't come into that A lobby that branches out into the sewers and long area. There was some back and forth because the attackers could also suck where your barriers, and then you're evening out. You're saying, okay, you can't come, but I can't come for 3 seconds. So we end up being both on time anyway. I don't want to throw away free stuff for teams to use too much, but there's certain areas where a knife can be thrown at the start of a round that you can't hit, and it closes out a part of the map you're trying to attack. And it's not mirrored. You can't, for example, split A. A defender could throw a knife into that kind of corner right in front of you before the stairs that go toward the attackers. And it's going to get all the stairs, all the little sewer ropes. It might even get in the cafe, I think, the little cafe corner. And for an attacking team that wants to rush A, maybe they just want to sit there and flank hold, you just can't be there, or you're gonna get suppressed. You can't hit that knife. It's on the other side of a wall right at the start of a round. What are you gonna do? And you can't throw your own knife back. First of all, you can't see around the corner as KO. You'd have to run around the corner with the knife out. You could throw it right at the kind of a main choke where the defender barrier comes up. You could throw it at the top of the ramp. But the KO on defense who's throwing a knife can throw it from anywhere. I hope this isn't too hard to visualize, but it's an example of one part of one map where this ability is going to cross out options. If you want to rush right away on Aeon attack and a KO's throwing that knife, you're not. You can't. You're not going to. You got to wait it out. If they want to rush and push that area afterward, it's going to be hard because you kind of had to back up. It's one example of how this ability is going to, in a very lopsided way, it can be really oppressive on the pace of a round and a map, depending. It's just one example of the super crazy power level of this. And I think his ult is also pretty maddening as well. Not to jump topics, but
I mean, yeah, but you're right. Like, we haven't even touched on the ult, and I think it was Jonas who tweeted it out. There was a clip he put out of somebody popping a showstopper, right? And as soon as audio cue went off, dropped the knife. She was dead to rights, right? She was just like a sitting duck, because at that point there was nothing else she could do with it. There's so much that, as you start to talk about these early aggressive hits, right? Like you mentioned split, the bottom of ramps on split. You think about like bind, short haul, right? Like there's so much that is. There are so many certain areas of the maps that are predisposed to these early aggressive, hot and heavy hits. And you're right, one knife alone, like, negates all of it.
Yeah. Yep. Totally. I think this ability is so. Once you've suppressed one team of players in an area, you're just the favorite of that contest for that piece of map for 8 seconds. That's such a crazy. You could just pull out more utility and take your time to keep throwing at them. I mean, 8 seconds is a long time, and I think basically, if you become this ability favors the team proactively taking space on the other team very heavily. And when you combine that with how it's free, it gets information, it's a very large circle, it goes through walls, it's quick, it's very hard to outmaneuver it. And what happens is there's something that is overly easy at finding value and overly hard at avoiding that favors the person to first use it aggressively. And I think what we'll end up seeing is a meta more familiar to pre-Astra, where teams mostly, it was a game of giving up and taking space. Oh, I'm going to aggress this, and I'm going to play retake on that, because I'd rather be aggressing that while you're there later than standing there waiting for you to attack to respond. I think we'll see a return of that format of how Valorant meta is playing, is my guess. A lot of retake, they kind of call it. I think we'll see more of a retake meta.
For sure. I like that too, going back to the days where you saw like a lot of like the breach jet, although I guess you can't run a breach anymore. You gotta run a KO. It's funny too, hearing like this ability just be so overpowered in your eyes. But how do you feel about the rest of the kit? Do you feel like those abilities are like weaker for response? Because like if you look at it, his flash feels like the most fair flash in the game. Like you can see it coming the whole way. Like you can finally dodge from a flash, which is just not really possible with a lot of other agents. So what's your lead on the rest of the kit?
I think his flash doesn't seem crazy, except with the new flashes that are easier to turn from. His flash is akin to a CSGO flash, where you can, you crouch in this corner and aim here and left click. And it's a set flash you've learned where it pixel perfect pops around the corner. Now that really perfect pop flashes are more important, the fact that he has the flashes best fit for that in the game helps him a lot. I think his like nade molly thing is kind of mediocre, but like as a tool, it's still useful with the rest of his kit. But I think they're pretty fair abilities. I think his flash might be the best, but I don't think it's like oppressive by any means. I think his ult is probably the best ult in the game, and maybe the best ability. It doesn't give you information when you've suppressed people, but it, you just describe it, right? He gets combat stimmed. It shoots this wave that's basically Killjoy ult sized out, where people can't use abilities. Your only choice really is to run away, other than to take a fight with him. If you take a fight with him, his weapon shoots 30% quicker than you. If you still somehow win the fight, he's not even dead. like what? I'm sorry, but that thing is crazy.
Revive me, Jet.
I feel a need to say that I get really excited about this game, and I'm getting so passionate and hot. I feel I'm cringing at how confident I sound in my takes. I think I'm overconfident because I knew Astra would be busted, and I think most of us did, and it kind of, boosts the ego a bit. But I might be wrong, and I do want to say that I haven't seen the official patch notes. I haven't really gotten much playtime with him. So before I keep going with ranting, this is my guess, but I'm willing. At least feel a need to say I know this is just speculation.
Sure.
Yeah, I like it. There's one thing that we don't have to speculate on because we know KO's name. And this is a gripe of mine, is that Riot cannot come up with different enough sounding names. First, it was Brimstone and Breach, two burly dudes that start with a BR. Then it's Raze and Reyna. Oh, that sounds familiar. And now we have KJ and KO. That is just unreasonable, right?
Yeah.
I hadn't even thought about that.
I loved early on in the game when I was like a Sova and Cypher player, and like I don't know,
Sova
like
Sage.
I'd never have a hard time with this anymore. But I remember at the time seeing somebody revealed and trying to figure out who it is from their silhouette and being like, they look the same, they sound the same, they both have boots and beards, and their names start with B. And I was like, why do they have to be so much? There's twins. But yeah, no, it is a good point. He's got a funny name. I'm just going with the letters K and O. I'm not writing the whole thing out. I gave up already.
I support you in that.
Yeah, thank you.
Cap, this has been a blast. Thank you so much for joining us. Listen, I want to take just a few moments here at the end of the show. I know there's a lot of work you're putting into the community beyond just your job as a coach. I know you're putting out a good bit of content as well. So why don't you take a moment? Tell us the content that you're working on. Tell us where people can find you as far as social goes. Flex on yourself a little bit here.
Thank you. You can follow me at Twitter, twitter.com/itskaplan. It's KAPLAN. And on YouTube, same thing, youtube.com/itskaplan. And just checking it out right now. I'm going to
can you repeat that for
This is going to be
you?
a big one. And hopefully some, one-off YouTube content coming up about the game and VOD reviews and stuff. I try to get that out, but haven't in a while. But I do have a podcast series called No Cap, which is usually myself and one other guest per week.
Big fan, by the way. Big fan.
Yep. Doug here actually was on my most recent episode, and we talk. Sometimes it's very heavy about the game's meta and whatnot. Other times I really like to hear about somebody's career path, like Doug's here, or talk more about the, emotional or psychological challenges of being in esports, or kind of how a team is run from an out-of-game end. I kind of try to hit a variety of topics, and hopefully it will be weekly, but that has not been consistent yet.
Listen, folks, check it out. If you haven't checked out the show, I promise you it's a good one. Go ahead, take a look at all the content he's putting out.
Please.
The guy does a lot in the scene, and I said this when I was introducing Cap and Ender at the beginning of this, is like, I genuinely believe that Cap is one of the brighter minds when it comes to this entire scene. So if you want to learn more from both a psychological perspective and just a game perspective in general, take a look at his content. But folks, that is going to do it for us. Thank you so much for hanging out. We had a lot of new faces. We covered a lot of content, and we totally ran well over the time that I said we were going to be on. So fellas, I apologize, but I guess it wouldn't be esports content if that wasn't the case. Folks, if you enjoy the content, please consider supporting the channel, like, comment, subscribe, all of the things that you can do to engage with the channel right now. And make sure you follow both Cap and Ender on Twitter. That's going to do it for us. Until next time, have a good night.